How's it going, class? My name is Shane Suttles, and I'll be teaching you guys about tragedy of the commons. First, I want to give you guys an example of what tragedy of the commons is, and then why this pertains to air pollution. Tragedy of the commons gives a deep-rooted understanding to how selfish acts of poor resource management and the greed of economic expansion has quickly caught up to us. The simplest metaphor that I can think explains tragedy of the commons referring to a typical Halloween tradition. During Halloween, a lot of times homeowners will leave a bowl of candy on their porch and write a sign saying, "Take one piece." As the night goes on, more often than not, after a short while, a kid will take the majority of the whole bowl for candy of his own benefit and good. Personally, I have been this kid. I've also been the homeowner that has put the candy out hoping that kids wouldn't do this. But this is just a common example of how people think. They think for their own benefit. Um, Kids, they see a bowl of candy and it says to take one piece, but they don't see anyone watching, so they want more naturally. They want to just take the candy and automatically have more than what they would have if they rang the doorbell and the homeowner handed them one piece of candy. Tragedy of the commons air pollution is a lot like this. In fact, that greed of economic expansion has absorbed resources and polluted our air with carbon dioxide and the burning of fossil fuels for the last century. Many companies have greed for power and money. So through economic expansion, their greed and power has unfortunately hurt our earth. In order to understand the severity of our issues, it is important to comprehend the foundation and background of where our tragedy of the commons began. The Industrial Revolution began in the early 1900s when technology became more prominent than ever before. This became the first site of machine automation as laborers started to slowly be replaced by cost and time-efficient machinery. In the eyes of business owners, the long-term goals of profit and expansion were foreseen as a success, but the longevity of our Earth's future had just become compromised. Initially, during the Industrial Revolution, this understanding of greenhouse gases was very minimal and taken lightly throughout the increase of the revolution, ultimately setting the foundation for a polluted world. It wouldn't be until 1960 when the movement for environmental awareness began. This leaves 60 years of damage done before the world even caught awareness. The year 2020 soon approaches in January, leaving 60 years between the first awareness and approximately 120 years of built-up damage from the foundation of the tragedy of the commons. Following the Industrial Revolution, our world grew rapidly with greed based on monetary value. Greed became the key roots to the tragedy of the commons, as greed established anxious efforts to compete and selfishly claim resources, leaving little left for accompanied parties. Expansion and growth became the motivation for economic value. Competition increased drastically. The benefits of this greed solely helps productivity on specific factors rather than creating global benefits. Whether a small business corporation, our country, the economic value of expansion has been driven without selflessness. The downside to this has created a world of pollution and resource scarcity. The reflection of economic expansion has increased the emission of carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and other numerous harmful greenhouse gases. On the left-hand corner, as you can see, is one of the first vehicles that are made. Obviously, these weren't as popular as vehicles are today just because they were first being started, but these are one of the main causes to global emissions of carbon dioxide and the burning of fossil fuels. On the right-hand side, you see a factory with a lot of smog being inputted into the air. The emission levels, I can only imagine, are very high just at this factory alone. But as expansion continues, factories like this are very common. There's probably millions of them all around the world. And with all this smog and pollution being put into the air, it's not healthy for anybody. Underneath is another picture. It's kind of distorted, but I picked this picture because it's very unclear. There's so much smog that you can barely see some of the buildings in the background. They're very faded. And I thought it was just a good representation of the world that we live in and what it could look like potentially everywhere if we don't stop. This slide right here is the current status of global emissions chart. Uh, the year starts in 1900, where they tracked the global emissions, and it was just under 1,000 million metric tons. As we go 114 years later, it doesn't show 2014, but it is just under 10,000. Seeing as it's year 2019, almost 2020, I could only assume that it's way above 10,000. I couldn't find an accurate chart that was credible for my PowerPoint slides, but this seemed backed up with good information, and I can only assume that it's way higher now. So, as we discussed everything previous, I think it was important to show some solutions and how we can change the world that we live in today. The Clean Air Act was designed by Congress in 1990. The goal of this act was to address various causes of pollutants in the economy. This put rules and regulations on many companies and businesses that manufacture goods, but gives them flexibility to choose various alternative situations. The Clean Air Act has multiple sectors of policies and laws protecting air pollution. These policies cover sectors from business manufacturing to motor vehicle emissions and fuel standards. The Clean Air Act has many different policies regarding all walks of life. Because Tragedy of the Commons mainly is suitable to business expansion and economic growth, I chose to discuss the Clean Air Act policies that pertain to that. Many companies are checked and regulated to make sure that they're not emitting harmful gases or runoff that goes into rivers and tampers with ecosystems and wildlife. I think that this is very important because it humbles the companies to remain conscious of what they're doing, and in some cases make efforts to fight for environmental safety. The next point here is global awareness. Global awareness is very important because I feel like lack of knowledge creates lack of action. When people are aware of what is going on, I think they're more motivated to act and make a change. Whether it's just recycling at your house, or not wasting water, or using products that are safe for the environment, people don't do that naturally. They need to be aware and they need to know what's going on in order to make action. Another point for solutions is solar energy. I've seen this personally in my neighborhood become a lot more common within that last 10 years. People have been installing solar panels, they've been getting solar heating for their pools. In the top right, you'll see a windmill. Windmills are a very good source of reusable energy, and as more windmills take place, they can power energy for businesses and companies that manufacture or need a lot of energy. So the more we have windmills, the more efficient we are as a nation. Um, Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed my slides, and I hope that this was good information so that hopefully you guys can make an impact yourselves.